Hello fellow space engineers. Today we are taking a look at the Gaia class carrier. It's the largest ship in the Gaia family of ships. I've already showcased the destroyer, the frigate and the cruiser. So I figured I will do a showcase of this carrier and at the same time explain a little bit about the main concepts that I applied to it and kind of like my views on how to make a carrier and why I did it. So the first thing to note is that this is not a super carrier. So if we do a direct comparison with carriers in modern navies today, this would be more of an LHD, which means landing helicopter deck or landing helicopter dock, if I'm not mistaken. It's an amphibious assault ship, which means that helicopters can land on it, and it has a well deck to launch amphibious vehicles like APCs or these hovercrafts that bring tanks and all sorts of vehicles to the shore. So it's more like that. It's a smaller type of carrier, which purpose is to launch marine vehicles, launch marines, and support them. So why I decided to do a small carrier instead of a super carrier like everyone else in the workshop? Well, the first concern that I had was performance. As you can see, this ship actually brings my system down quite a bit. The frame rate decreases a lot, and also the amount of players that I usually play with. I only have a few friends that have this game right now, and they are not on all at the same time. So realistically, we're looking at 4 players maximum per play session. So a large ship is going to require a larger crew. So that's why I decided to go with more like a smaller multi-functional carrier instead of a large one, which is basically going to be just like a large museum to showcase like all the fighters that you can put in it, because they're not going to be, you know, being used all the time. So now on the main characteristics of this Gaia ship, I decided to make a combination of landing pads and landing bays. Like I said, the main inspiration is the LHDs or the smaller type of carriers that you see in most navies today, specifically this newer Spanish Australian carrier that the navies of both countries now have. So that's why I went for this like narrower flight deck. And on the bottom side, we added these launch bays, which are kind of like reminiscent of a TV series of the 90s that I enjoyed a lot, Space Above and Beyond, which brought a really unique approach to like science fiction designs in the way that they were more realistic and at the same time more militaristic. They tend to look more like modern ships, and I guess it's no secret that I like that kind of design for my own ships too, because traditionally in what you see in science fiction is fighter craft being launched by launch tubes as if they were torpedoes, and yeah, that makes for a really, really interesting and cool launch scene, you know, from the perspective of the pilot. But in reality, when you're in space, there's no such need for that. I mean, you can get away without it and save a lot of space. Basically, what the fighter craft did in that series was that they docked in this bay, and then the pilot was raised up inside of his cockpit. So we have an area that is depressurized, you know, that can like launch and recover aircraft, spacecraft at will, without having to compress and decompress and recompress through each launch. So basically, that turns the hangar area into a no atmosphere area, which it has its pros and cons. Um, that is relevant to us right now in space engineers because we recently got 2 updates that brought both atmospheres inside of ships and blast doors that seal off still in those atmospheres. So, in that sense, you can have an area to work on the ship that is deprived of oxygen or air, and it's gonna help if the ship suffers a malfunction or if there's a fire. So all sort of things. Speaking in a kind of like a science fiction scenario, because right now in the game we don't have any kind of malfunctionings or fires, which will be interesting to see how your crew can manage to recover from such events. So anyways, that was the main goal with this launch base. It was to have a hangar bay that is deprived of any atmosphere, so engineers can work easily and move around without having to go through airlocks to get things or move things around. But with the recent update of the airtight blast doors, we are gonna change this ramp design, which took us a lot of time to do. It was, well, quite the learning curve, quite the learning experience to make them. But in the end, we ended up with this weak spot here at the rotor. And I know you can add two rotors on each end with kind of like that rotor attachment thing that used to be a glitch and now it's official. But in the end, you definitely must lock the ramp or the launching bay door, whatever you want to call it, with this landing gear here. The inertia on the ship, when it moves and stops and rotates, it just opens up the doors. It doesn't matter if the rotor is on or if it's off. It's gonna open them. They're gonna bang around, potentially breaking the rotor and separating and creating a hazard or like a chain reaction, one door hitting the other and falling like dominoes and damaging the ship. So, as interesting and as useful as this door/ramp is, we're gonna have to change it. And I already started working on the inside of the ship. It's being painstakingly slow, having to add all these blast doors, naming them, using naming conventions, so it's easier to recognize them and group them and operate them in the end. So the objective would be to fully enclose each each launch recovery bay with its own blast doors. That way you can isolate problems or isolate crafts that are damaged, or maybe if one of them crashes into and explodes. So that would keep those debris from affecting other crafts, which is so important in an aircraft carrier. If you take a look at just naval history or naval warfare history throughout World War II, you see that, or even in the 60s, you see that an aircraft that is loaded with bombs and fuel, it's quite a hazard and quite the danger for other aircraft that is around if something happens to that particular craft. So anyway, that's my little rant on the whole blast door issue thing. Well, not an issue, it's a redesign. So let's keep talking about the Gaia class assault carrier, or LHD, whatever you want to call it right now. So I wanted a ship that could handle some of the larger dropships, some of the smaller ones that we have designed, as well as the smaller craft, the attack craft and the fighter craft. That led us to have this kind of like form factor. So all of our crafts have to fit in one of these bays. So far they do. That's kind of like our design constraint. So it can launch craft and repair them from those bays, or can just like launch and rearm them from here with a crew that basically operates from these cargo containers that are conveyor linked to the entirety of the ship. So basically the crew can go in there, grab the ammunition or the fuel and refuel the craft that land here. The main armament of the carrier is not installed yet. I'm trying to decide which kind of turret to put in here. I already already did a video on great turret design that I'm gonna link in this description of this one. So I'm thinking about adding these ones here, but maybe one of the smaller versions. Maybe not the Odin Mark III, maybe the Mark II that has two of those CSD battle cannons. I think it would go better with a carrier because a carrier is not meant to be, engaging the enemy directly. It's gonna be a little bit behind or covered by its battle group of ships. So the main armament of the carrier is defensive. It has 16 of these Gatling turrets, and I designed them in this kind of like a stubby protrusion here, so they cover the entirety of the ship. There's 3 on each side, three of these stops or stumps, and they have one turret on top and one turret on the bottom. So basically, they have this sphere of coverage on their own, and those spheres, of course, interlock one with the other. So that was the 4 section close-in weapon system defense. This is the midships section, and towards the back, of course, we have the aft section of the ship, but it's covered by these other stuff. So I already showcased this elevator. It's not the most stable elevator because it only has 1 piston, but it works. It can bring 2 firecraft or a single large dropship. So far, no problem with it. And of course, you have to lock it. The lock position is below. So when this ship is operating its craft, when it's launching, and when it's recovering craft, it's not meant to be doing any high-speed maneuvering. You could do it if there was a system for an elevator that didn't require a piston. So now that I'm here, showing you the elevator portion of the ship, I am in a good position to showcase these ramps here. These ramps are the access to the to the well deck, which is where the APCs are going to be stored. Kind of like reminiscent of the landing well or the well deck of an LHD that basically floods and makes the APCs there float and they can launch through there. Like I said, it's kind of like excuse me, reminiscent of that. So it's not that, it's not that useful in space. So I made in the end end up replacing these ramps with more blast doors. Maybe I will bring these blast doors a little bit outwards to have like more well deck space. Of course, I can only bring them up to this line here where the piston begins, because pistons are not air sealed. So that's gonna be like it's gonna be vacuum here. So basically, I can only extend this thing up to this point. Okay, that's for the back side, the aft section of the ship. Now let's move a little bit forward, and I'm going to show you these side access doors, which are basically cargo doors. They have an elevator on each side, and the idea is that they communicate the well deck of the ship with the upper hangar deck that in turn leads to the launch pads, the launch bays here, and also they can communicate all the way up to the flight deck using the aft elevator. So basically you can move a fighter craft all the way from the hangar deck into the flight deck, or you can move a smaller vehicle, or let's say like a forklift or something that are going to be added to the ship all the way into the well deck, or even personnel or cargo containers. Okay, so this ship only has 4 missile turrets because they're meant to, just shoot down smaller fighters or also player-made torpedoes. They are not an offensive weapon. Right now, I know people use them as such in a smaller craft, but for a big carrier such as these, for the amount of lag that they cause and for their effectiveness, they are really not the most effective weapon, to attack another ship. So that's where the big battle cannons come in. Okay, I'm gonna show you the inner sections of the ship, at least some of them, the ones that are finished. We go through this main access airlock here, and we open this one, which is the main access airlock. Yeah, there's a decompression to this upper hangar. This hangar is meant to house the larger dropship, a single one of them, and it can also work as a communication bay between the large elevator behind the aft section and between the side flight decks. So let's open it up completely. Let's see. Airtight. Let's open everything. There you go. These blast doors, they only cover 2 blocks. So if your opening is gonna be taller or wider than 2 blocks, you have to add another one. That's why these side bay openings for the larger dropship require blast doors on the top and on the bottom. Okay, so as you can see now, it's fully accessible from all sides. The aft elevator, the big aircraft elevator. Now you can put a dropship in here, close it in, land another one, keep it there, or bring one in, repair it, move it sideways, or move a small craft through these 2 large blast doors from one deck onto the other, or personnel too. Okay, now let's go into the main hangar deck. This is the main access to the hangar deck. As you can see, it also works as communication between the 2 sides of the ship. So the launch base on the port side can be linked with the ones on the starboard side through this space here. This line here, I am trying to decide if I should add blast doors also, or just keep it as a separation. Because this entire thing encloses, so maybe I don't see a need of separating the access portion with the actual hangar portion. It might be useful, but we'll see. So this is what I talked about, the cargo elevator. The area where the elevator is not pressurized. These blast doors are here just for the purpose of protecting the insides. So let's bring the elevator down and let's show you the well deck. The elevator is going down. Oh no, sorry, wrong button. Let's go on the outside. I have to reconfigure all those panels. On the outside. Okay. Here it is. I think this one is for the elevator. Let's see. Yeah. So that's the idea. This small outside cargo elevator communicates the well deck. This is where the APCs are going to be stored and launch into any planetoid or asteroid that you want to secure, invade, or clear out of, xenomorph or whatever. So, and through this you move cargo and personnel, small boxes from one bay into the other. So like I mentioned before, I'm planning on moving these blast doors ship is large enough that it actually has a bilge, and as you can see, it goes deeper. You can see piping down there. So with these designs, you eventually end up with a lot of crevices and portions of the ship that are usually closed off. But I want to keep showing you the insides of the ship. Sorry. So again, front door. I'm gonna keep moving into the other facilities of the vessel. So if we enter through one of these launch bays, we get to this one. This is the medical bay access. So as you can notice, it has a big airlock in the middle. So we can close it and basically isolate ourselves from both the interior of the ship and the launch bays. So what's the idea behind this? It's only one block deep, but we have to remember that in space engineers, each block is 2.5 meters. That's quite a lot. So when we were theorizing about this design for the medical bay, a carrier such as these needs to have a larger medical bay because one of its functions would be colony relief or humanitarian missions, just like the carriers today. So what if you bring a lot of casualties, or what if you bring in some, I don't know, infected personnel with something weird, or some parasites, whatever. So first of all, you need containment, quarantine, and you also need an airlock, because, and the airlock has to be big. I mean, the airlock, it couldn't be a single block airlock. Otherwise, if you're doing triage and you have casualties that are like really, near death, you want to group them, put them all in the airlock, and bring them in at the same time. You don't want to do them one by one, because by the time the last one gets in, might be dead. So anyway, just leaving you with a little bit of backstory here for your role-playing entertainment. So this is the airlock to access the medical bay. As you can see, it has a ramp here, for stretchers, things like that, medical supplies, a little observation platform here for the doctors doing the supervision and triage or whatever. And this enclosed both surgery or like recovery room. Actually, I might need to do a separate surgery room. Right now, these catwalks are basically a stand-in for beds, for hospital beds. I have yet to install the mods here. So I was talking about quarantine, and as you can see, this entire space can be sealed off from the rest of the ship. It has corridors that go around it, so they don't disrupt the motion, the everyday transit of the crew. And speaking of which, we have crew quarters here. We have an armory, which have yet to be furnished with mods. We have the crew quarters, which again have yet to be furnished with actual bunk beds from mods again. So you get the idea. You move in, you find the showers. No, sorry, these are the showers. These are meant to be like little stalls with showers. There's not much privacy in the military, so that's it. Open showers. Maybe they're like one of those ultra futuristic gender equal showers like in Starship Troopers. And these are the space toilets, and space toilets need to be enclosed. I don't need to explain why. You can imagine why. So we move through this mini airlock here, and we find another open area. This entire area is the service bay. It's meant to be like the base for the let's say kind of like ground personnel that takes care of aircraft today. This is going to be station for the personnel that rearms and refuels and repairs the aircraft, so they're going to work from here. So that's why this entire area is basically a large airlock. So the personnel come here, they suit up, they grab their equipment, depressurize the room, and they go to work out here. It can be locked, it can be open. The idea is to keep it fully open while the carrier is in operations. You know, this entire area depressurizes and the engineering personnel works around it. Here we have, guess what? More crew quarters. You know, it's a carrier. It has a lot of crew members. This crew compartment has direct access to the launch base. So this crew compartment belongs to the engineering and maintenance personnel or pilots. And right here we have the mining facility refinery. It takes 2 decks. Remember that we're talking, naval terms here, not floors, not levels. We're talking about decks, as well as we're not landing or taking off from a carrier, we're launching and recovering. Okay, so this is it. The 2 decks that form the refinery room with a little access to a higher deck, with also a little access to the main turret that is going to be placed there. And this leads us to a large mess hall and recreation room that is going to have a nice space view. One of the 2 that the carrier has. So let's continue moving forwards. Show you the forward reactor compartment. Huge compartment. I might need to add more reactors depending on the type of propulsion that I end up giving the carrier. I've been checking out some really good mods that bring new and more powerful engines that do require more more juice for them to function. So this is the forward reactor compartment, and currently it houses 1 single reactor, but eventually in the future it might house more. So no big deal, nothing out of the extraordinary here, just gyroscopes, reactors, things that make the ship move around. We go down towards the bilge and we start finding this access, is mirroring the one on the top for the bottom turret, and this side door, these side corridors that go around it, and they do go around it because remember, this is an outside access point, so it's an airlock that goes on the outside. So to give the crew freedom of motion throughout the ship, you don't want them, going in and out of an airlock all the time, so they can just head freely bypassing these airlocks. And we get here to the drop pod area. This is the area where we can house the Marines, and it has access to the drop pods here. This is the corridor that leads to the drop pod, and currently we don't have any of those installed. So, but you get the idea. The Marines will basically live here. This is their crew compartment, their gym, simulator, whatever, their living area, and they go directly into here. So this area is going to be very distinct. It's going to be themed after many other sci-fi works that you have seen and enjoyed. Basically like the suit up scene from Aliens. This is the last one of those drop pod access points, and we get to the mess hall. So this mess hall, of course, is going to serve both the Marines and other personnel, since the carrier already has 2. It has way too many people, so it needs to feed a lot of people. Okay. Continue, you've seen this in my other videos. This is the briefing room for the pilots. Here's the break. To put some like annoying fighter pilots, piss you off, just lock them in here. And this works also kind of like a courtroom. So if you want to, I don't know, you capture some pirates, some space pirates, you lock them up in the brig, and then you have the trial here. So you can actually roleplay with this ship quite a lot. So this is the main access stairwell. You've seen this already in other videos, so I'm going to show you the new stuff. Down here we go to a really interesting area. This is the bottom radar conning tower, but if we go through it, well, that's the main thing, access for the radar. If we go through this section here, we go to the observation deck. This observation deck, looks directly down and looks forward and to the sides to the landing, the drop pods. So we have 1, 2, and 3 on one side and 3 on the other one. So this area is meant to coordinate the marine planet side operations. It has, all the screens and stuff. It looks kind of like a mini bridge. It's an inverted bridge, so it's not meant to control the ship. It's meant to coordinate the land operations, the planet side operations. If we go back here, we find this maintenance area of the bilge that eventually is going to house an access port for a craft that will dock under the belly of the carrier, pretty much like the old Zeppelins. They have these aircraft, small planes hanging from them. If you like Indiana Jones, you know what I mean. And if you continue through here, this is the assembler that is going to manufacture the things that are going to be loaded into that small craft. We get more sections on the bilge. You still need to give them purpose. So we have lots of empty spaces and things to do, things to work around in this carrier before the final version is published in the workshop. So that's a tour of the Gaia carrier. I hope you enjoyed it. I skipped some parts like the bridge, the CIC, because I already showed them. They're basically the same module that you're going to find in the destroyer and the cruiser.